They are born in chaos, and they bring death and destruction to our Earth.
We looked across the street from us, and there was total devastation. It looked like a bomb had been dropped.
They rip a path through the heavens and tear apart the fabric of our lives.
The neighbors all gathered at my house because ours was the only house left.
They are nature at its most terrifying. They are tornadoes. Time for our journey to begin. You howl in fury and have no regard for the works of man. Tornadoes. Knowledge surrounds these library walls, and with these instruments, that knowledge can be ours. Man has dedicated much time to exploiting and confining nature. But nature can fight back fiercely. There are few forces of nature as savage as a tornado. Is man helpless in the face of such wind-driven rage? We need to take a closer look at one of those terrible winds.
It was a foregone conclusion that we were going to die. It was just a matter of waiting for the exact moment.
I can remember holding my family together in the bathroom and praying to be saved.
As I was moving through the house, I could already hear windows breaking. I started talking to God about whether or not I was going to make it through this experience.
There's nothing on Earth to compare to the sight and sound of this storm creature as it pounces upon its helpless victims.
People will tell you that tornadoes sound like a train, and they do. It sounds like it's going right through your home.
The sounds were so intense. The glass breaking, the 2x4s just snapping, and you realize that your house is coming apart, and you're just absolutely helpless.
You could hear things breaking, cracking, windows breaking, things hitting the house, and we weren't sure when we opened the door to the bathroom what we would find.
These people have lived through a terror that descended from the heavens. They have experienced a tornado, an ordeal that has blown lives apart for centuries. Indians of the Great American Plains feared and respected tornadoes. They believed that they could drive them from their villages with this. At the first sign of a tornado, they would take an axe, swing it over their heads, and then bury it by the handle with the blade facing the menace. According to legend, the storm would split in two, leaving the Indians in peace. In the intervening centuries, our scientific knowledge has grown, but our ability to fight back has remained the same.
Tornadoes sometimes touch down for just a matter of seconds. And the tornado may destroy one or two houses and then lift right up, leaving the house right next to it completely undamaged.
The word tornado comes from the Latin word torne, meaning turn, and the erratic paths they take are only one of the more terrifying things about them. This tornado appeared in Minnesota in the north-central United States, and amazingly enough, a helicopter was in the vicinity with a very brave pilot and cameraman on board, and they captured one of these turning winds in this spectacular footage. These winds can exceed 200 miles an hour, and they lay waste to everything in their path. Fortunately, in this case, the tornado appeared over a forest, and the only damage was to some power lines that were flattened like matchsticks. The mindless malevolence of tornadoes makes them difficult to predict. We do know that the United States suffers more damage than any other nation, with an average 850 tornadoes a year. And that is in a good year. Tornado appearances are known as outbreaks, and most take place between February and May. The frightening thing is that the death toll was as great in the last great outbreak of 1974 as it was in 1884. Modern science seems helpless in the face of something so capricious, something that seems to appear and disappear almost at will.
On the average, something around 100 people a year are killed by tornadoes. Tornadoes come in many shapes and sizes, and we can reproduce all those in our laboratory model. And that's brings up one of the advantages of the laboratory model, in that one can reproduce time and again the same airflow.
At Purdue University in the United States, Dr. John Snow recreates tornadoes in this special chamber, paying close attention to their destructiveness.
Most people who are hurt by tornadoes are hurt indirectly through flying debris.
In a similar study conducted in the tornado-prone state of Texas, researchers have attempted to duplicate the effects of these winds on a simple piece of wood blown into the slab of thick concrete. A chilling example of what a tornado can do took place in April of 1974. In a two-day period, 148 of these terrible winds descended on the east-central United States. In the space of 16 hours, they killed 315 people and injured another 6,000.
In a 36-hour period, there were some 140 tornadoes produced. This was a tornado outbreak, and that particular one was the strongest outbreak we know of in recorded history. This is an example of one of those violent types of tornadoes. It's very large, very powerful, probably having wind speeds approaching 300 miles an hour. As a result, it just demolishes everything in its path.
It's almost as if man is being punished for presuming that he can control nature. Now that we've seen what these brutal storms can do, is there a way to fight them? To push these terrible winds from the sky? What is a tornado? Very simply, it's a storm gone bad. Very bad. These killer winds behave as if possessed by a malignant intelligence, and like many killers, they are unpredictable. Tornadoes are always born in the turmoil of a thunderstorm. Warm, moist air pressing against dry air creates an atmospheric witch's brew that soon forms clouds. And then, as it cools, rain. Thunderstorms are quite common, but in rare cases, the elements collide and a tornado begins to emerge. Occasionally, if the storm keeps growing, the winds at the top of the storm begin to rotate. And if that rotation continues and tightens, that spinning vortex may become something deadly, something called a tornado. Can we predict the arrival of one of these rogue storms? Some meteorologists believe it may be impossible.
It's extremely difficult. In fact, I would say it's nearly impossible to predict exactly where and when a severe thunderstorm, which might produce a tornado, would tend to form. So my feeling is we may be able to give 20 or 30 minutes notice for the very large tornadoes, but to be able to say that 3 hours from now a tornado was going to form over a certain city is absolutely impossible. And I would say that we probably might not be able to do that for perhaps 50 or even 100 years.
On May 8th, 1986, the small community of Edmond, Oklahoma huddled indoors. The air was electric. Something evil was on the loose. And as the day met the evening, the time of the winds began.
On that day, we were getting signs of some impending heavy thunderstorms across Oklahoma. We were watching for indications from the National Weather Service. We were also listening to the folks down at Severe Storms Lab in Norman. And we did have an indication of some very strong thunderstorms building later in the day.
As night began to fall, so too did the winds, forming into a huge black funnel.
Those funnels, very shortly thereafter, one of them at least touched down and became the Edmond tornado.
That night, few slept as the winds ravaged the terrified community.
It looked like a war zone, absolutely. There was debris 4 and 5 feet thick.
We had both cars destroyed. Our Blazer, which was just a couple days old, was thrown upside down into our front bedroom.
We looked across the street from us and there was total devastation. It looked like a bomb had been dropped.
Edmond was completely devastated, but miraculously, no one was killed or even injured.
I feel very fortunate we survived. In looking at the neighborhood afterwards, it's a miracle that people didn't die.
The people that were affected, completely devastated, that were right in the path of the tornado, all were astounded that no one was injured, that we actually came out of this alive, and just happier people for it.
The people of Edmond survived, but nobody can say for certain when another tornado will return.
Can we predict the unpredictable, stop the unstoppable? These questions are of paramount importance to millions of people who live in the area known as Tornado Alley, a wide strip of land that spans the central plains of the United States. Right in the heart of this area stands a laboratory that has joined the battle against these hellish winds.
While most people do everything possible to stay out of the way of a tornado, scientists of this laboratory are doing just the opposite.
We have a lot of sensors here at the National Severe Storms Laboratory that we use to make measurements in storms. Very important to our research are the radars. And right now, the kind of radar that we use are Doppler radars. They're newer, somewhat different than radar we had in the past. And the way that they are different is that they add a new piece of information. That information, properly processed, gives you the motion of those raindrops up inside the storm. Knowing the air motion inside the storm, then we can learn how that storm evolves, what makes it tick, how does the air get flowing in the direction that it flows. And very important, perhaps the most important piece of information is when does it start spinning.
Any warning given before a tornado strikes can save hundreds of lives, and that warning time may increase. Through the use of sophisticated atmospheric analysis and radar mapping, we may gain precious minutes, time also gained through the efforts of dedicated researchers who defy the winds to do their worst.
Today, there are men and women who don't cower before the deadly wind. They seek it out. Why? To learn its secrets. Secrets they can share with us.
When tornadoes strike, most rational people head for their basement. But not these men and women. No, they head right into the winds, risking their lives in the pursuit of knowledge.
Storm chasers are a particular breed of person. It's actually almost inbred in you. There's something that tells you want to go out and chase severe thunderstorms and tornadoes. It sounds kind of off the wall, but there's a particular breed of us who love to do it, and we kind of derive a particular thrill of going out and seeing what is such a fleeting occurrence on the earth.
Okay, deploy. Let's go. I got the thing. Deploy. Yeah!
Many of these storm chasers travel with highly sophisticated equipment designed to measure the force of the storm, equipment that forms a virtual laboratory on wheels.
The mobile laboratory is used to move out, intercept severe and potentially dangerous storms, track with those storms, make measurements on those storms for future scientific analysis. But in the process, we would radio back-end information that might affect the public safety. I find that to be out in the open fields and in the presence of a very large storm is a rather awe-inspiring incident. You really do understand that you are an insignificant factor in front of a very large machine in the atmosphere.
Tornado trackers are not the only people who face these winds. The rest of the residents of Tornado Alley must also watch and wait. But there are warning signs that anyone can look for. Obviously, violent storms can herald something unpleasant, the arrival of a tornado.
The clouds were building, and the neighbors were outside looking. We were all looking at the storm, and we knew there was something to be concerned about then.
I started weather watching and went out on the front porch and was watching the clouds roll in, and the more they roll in, the darker and deeper they got.
It's referred to as a wall cloud. It's real black on the bottom, and it's almost as if someone took a ruler and drew a line in the sky.
It was pouring down rain like crazy. I mean, you wouldn't believe the way it was raining. And then we got a pea-sized hail that come shortly after that, like it was pouring out of a bucket.
And watch the tornado form. Little wisp clouds happen to start rotating, and then all of a sudden it just fell out of the sky.
We saw it coming, and we were just at God's mercy as to whether or not it was going to hit, whether or not it was going to destroy, and whether or not it was going to kill.
It is usually futile to run from a tornado, but over the years, crucial information has been gathered that has saved thousands of lives.
The first thing that people should consider in preparing for a tornado is that there's actually very little you can do to prevent property damage in an existing building. So what your really goal is to prevent injury and prevent death.
If a tornado warning is issued, people should immediately seek shelter in a basement.
We try to tell them to put as many walls between themselves and the tornado as they can. If a tornado does get close enough that it's going to start doing some damage, it's going to start tearing down the outside walls first.
Don't stay in the car, because a tornado will just tumble it over and over on the ground, and many people are killed in just that way.
Tornadoes can destroy human lives, and they can shatter the living as well, taking away their homes, their possessions, blowing their very lives to the brink of ruin. But out of this destruction can come hope. Hope that is said to spring eternal. A celebration of the human spirit that, in its own way, is as mysterious and unpredictable as the tornado itself. Though tornadoes take on many shapes and sizes, the human heart remains large.
People who didn't know each other became very close after the tornado because we shared something that was terrifying.
This was Edmond, Oklahoma, the day after. Already the town was being rebuilt, and already people were finding the strength to carry on.
It became kind of a joke. I mean, everybody started just laughing about it, and with no injuries, it was easy to just be thankful that you were still alive and that no one was injured, and that we were able just to start over.
Today, Edmond is whole again, its inhabitants as secure as they can be, because on the horizon, a dark cloud remains. Tornadoes are a reminder of how fragile the works of man are. The more we know about them, the less in control of them we seem. It's as if nature wanted to teach us humility and leave us trembling in the face of power beyond our comprehension. Tornadoes.
Winds that can tear the world apart.
Secrets and Mysteries presents information based in part on theories and opinions, some of which are controversial. The producer's purpose is not to validate any side of an issue, but through the use of actualities and dramatic recreation, relate a possible answer, but not the only answer, to this material.
They have appeared in our heavens for as long as man had the mind to look up.
Something frightened me, and I remember running back into the house and saying, "My God, this is for real. This is not a dream."
They reflect the light of our knowledge and the dark of our deepest fears.
They put this lens over my head. I felt a pain, and it was like there was a needle.
We don't know what they are, nor what they want from us. We can only say they're here.
Beyond what is known lies an unexplored world of shadows and phantoms. A land that knows no limits of time or space. From the dawn of discovery to the nightfall of catastrophe. Journey to a universe of the unexplained, the unforeseen, the unbelievable. A place beyond reality where no question will go unanswered. A place where myth and legend are law, superstition a science.
Time for our journey to begin.
Some call them UFOs. Many disbelieve. Who are you? Why are you here?
They shone more in the sky than the brightness of the sun, and extended to the limits of the four supports of the heavens.
3,400 years ago, that description of strange lights in the sky was recorded by Thutmose III, an Egyptian pharaoh. Another early UFO sighting is described in the Bible. Here, the prophet Ezekiel saw an object of gleaming metal with brightness around it. The prophet's sense of wonder and fear has survived into our modern era. For example, this woman is witnessing a phenomenon, a close encounter of the first kind, the sighting of an unidentified flying object, or UFO.
According to a recent poll taken in the United States, half of its population believed that the universe is inhabited by other intelligent life. The rest of the world cannot be far behind.
Even more surprising, over 20 million Americans believe they've seen a UFO. 20 million people, just in the United States.
When we think about UFOs, we remember the images presented in fiction. The reality, however, is somewhat different.
One of the first modern UFO sightings occurred in the late 1890s. Airships were spotted hovering all over the United States, moving through the skies. Dirigibles had not yet been invented, and contemporary newspaper accounts of the time referred to mystic flying lights. What were they? Some say something out of this world.
It's interesting to note that in 1896 and 1897 in this country, in the United States, when we had an airship flap, when there were no lighter-than-air craft, that people also misidentified Venus regularly as airships.
In the 1930s, in magazines like these, the strange lights first took on an otherworldly identity. Until that time, the lights in the sky had never been associated with outer space, and after 1947, they would rarely be associated with anything else. It was on the afternoon of June 27th, 1947, that Kenneth Arnold, a pilot flying in upstate Washington, reported seeing a group of objects that flew, in his words, like saucers skipping over the water. The age of the flying saucer had arrived, and the world would never be the same.
The 5-minute flight is restricted to a 3-foot altitude, since Muir is not a licensed pilot, and flying saucers aren't recognized aircraft. A 2-seater ready soon may be the car or chopper of the future. Help wanted, a crew of little green men.
The 1950s witnessed a sharp increase in the number of sightings all around the world, and with it, more and more evidence that something unusual was happening in our skies. Even the United States government took notice, beginning an official Air Force investigation called Project Blue Book. Their files soon overflowed with more than 12,000 sightings.
Documents have recently been released that purport to show that the U.S. government 40 years ago captured a crash saucer and the bodies of 4 aliens and has managed to keep that secret for 40 years.
There's just too much documentation there showing attempts by scientists to try to explain this phenomenon, to just dismiss it as a figment of people's imagination.
If President Nixon only knew who was able to keep the crash saucer secret for 40 years, he surely would have brought that person in to keep Watergate undercover.
There is something that flies in our atmosphere that scientists for 40 years have tried to explain and still cannot explain.
I hope that those who are responsible for producing those counterfeits and trying to con the news media and the American public are promptly brought to justice.
But if UFOs are only hoaxes, they are widespread, and they have stayed on the front pages for decades. No one, confirmed skeptic or fervent believer, has been able to say for certain just what they are. And they aren't going away. Arthur C. Clarke once said that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. This may hold true for the UFO phenomena as well. The objects that one sees may be completely beyond one's understanding. This is a close encounter of the second kind. Something is descending from the heavens into this woman's life. She has made contact. This is a close encounter of the third kind. This woman is coming face to face with something beyond her imagination. Her mind is no longer her own. She's about to undergo a terrifying odyssey, unprecedented in human experience. There's something happening around the world. Something strange.
Something frightened me, and I remember running back into the house and saying, "My God, this is for real. This is not a dream."
And it came towards the car that I was in very fast through the sky.
2 people came in, 2 aliens came inside the bedroom, and I was taken in aboard the ship.
When I was brought into the craft, I was brought into a room that was pitch black.
They put this lens over my head, and it was as though they were shooting lights, colored lights, into my head.
These experiences are close encounters of the fourth kind, physical contact with the unknown, contact that has been documented by a man named Bud Hopkins. Like many people who study UFOs, Hopkins leads two lives. The first as an internationally recognized sculptor and artist, and secondly as a researcher and guide, taking people on an occasionally terrifying journey through their suppressed memories, memories of their bizarre experiences.
If this is true, it's the biggest story of all time. It seems to be involved with an ongoing genetic experiment, which involves taking sperm and ova samples, following people across generations in the same family, and the apparent artificial insemination of women and then a removal of a fetus later. It is so intrinsically unbelievable. It sounds so wild, and I'm the first to admit that. Yet it is going on.
Could you tell me a little bit about what these people look like?
Just those big, big, intense eyes.
Big, big, intense eyes? Mm-hmm. What color are the eyes?
Very dark.
Mm-hmm.
Shiny, very shiny.
The patterns that I'm getting from these totally credible people are incredibly similar, these patterns, and the physical details are so similar. The weight of evidence depends upon the repetition of all these details in case after case after case, and the weight of evidence here is enormous.
The one I saw most clearly was about 4 to 4.5 feet tall, I think. Sitting down, it had big almond-shaped eyes and a long, thin face, a little thin mouth and nose.
A larger head and almond-shaped eyes.
Large heads, large eyes, dark eyes.
I felt a pain in the navel area, and it was like there was a needle put into my stomach.
Things were inserted in my nose, and things down to my stomach.
I said, you have no right. They said, we do have a right.
I have no reason to make up such a story. If I want to be known for something, this is the last thing that I would pick.
I'm not sure what their reason is for being here, but they're here. They're around us all the time.
If they're here, reports indicate that they are conducting some sort of experiment of mysterious dimension. Many witnesses describe undergoing strange tests on board these crafts. Tests involving examination tables, bright lights, strange sounds, probes, and needles. Most abductees describe a sophisticated kind of surgery that leaves indelible scars, physically and mentally. They also recall moments of excruciating pain. And when these strange tests have ended, the abductees are returned to their homes with no conscious memory of their ordeal. But dreams persist, shadow images of stolen time.
What these people are describing is fantastic. How can it be that diverse people scattered around the world describe seeing the same thing? Well, there may be one explanation.
Well, I think there are a couple of reasons that people perhaps report similar things. One obvious one is that they have either heard or read or had some exposure to prior information somewhere along the line that they may not recall consciously getting early on. And the second thing is that many of these experiences in perception or misperception are based on common symbolic needs that people have and express themselves in similar ways. I think that people may have a need to believe in UFOs because we tend to look for solutions out there, for a guru to lead us to the promised land that is not from our own immediate area, that in some mysterious way the answer to our problems is going to come from out there someplace, not from our own backyard.
To this woman and many others, there's no question that UFOs exist. Still, many are not convinced. If UFOs have been sighted with such frequency, it's surprising the physical evidence is so inconclusive.
It could be said that UFO witnesses are the worst group of photographers ever to hold a camera. But some say there is evidence that not only proves their existence, but explains precisely what they are. Is this proof that these beings and their ships exist? Or is it just a sophisticated hoax?
Edward Mulhare is a Swiss caretaker with a 6th grade education and a fantastic story. He claims to have had numerous close encounters with creatures from another star system. And what is more, he claims to have the evidence to back these stories up.
These pictures have been analyzed by experts. They have been unable to prove any fraud.
Muir claims that in January of 1975, he was contacted telepathically and guided to come into an area of the forest that was outside his village. And there he met with entities from a star cluster called the Pleiades, which is about 500 light years from Earth. And since that time, Muir claims that he's met over 100 times under similar circumstances with the Pleiadians, as he calls them. During the course of several years, Muir took hundreds of clear-color daylight photographs and about 8 8mm film segments.
If Muir has experienced what he claims, it's a revelation. And if he has not, then his case serves as a warning to those who readily believe what the naked eye tells them. For those lights in the sky may have many explanations. All one needs is an open mind.
We must consider every point of view. For example, Philip Klass, a self-proclaimed skeptic who has made a career out of exploding illusions and exposing fraud.
In the 21 years that I have been investigating UFO cases, including some of the most famous, seemingly most mysterious UFO cases, I have found a few hoaxes. In my opinion, Billy Muir is a not very clever hoaxer. And in fact, one of his movies that I have seen certainly involves using a small model suspended from a string, probably from a bamboo fishing pole.
First of all, the UFO community does not, as a rule, subscribe to claims of contact, especially repeated contact, and Muir claims to have had over 100 contacts.
I would say that anyone who believes Billy Muir's story probably also believes in Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy. To my knowledge, in 40 years, there is not a single credible photograph of a craft-like UFO anywhere.
UFOs may not be from outer space. There are other, even stranger points of departure. We must journey to those places now.
Our first feeling upon looking into the unknown is usually fear. But fear could be replaced with wonder, for those bright lights might be a signpost, pointing us to something wonderful.
If one really thinks hard about this most curious phenomenon, many possible explanations can be found. But perhaps the answer can never be understood until our minds are ready. Between fantasy and reality, there may be a middle ground.
If these things are actually taking place, I think that the FBI, the Defense Department, the whole U.S. government should be mobilized. But it never occurred, apparently, to some of these authors to report it to the federal authorities. They just like to go out collecting these tales, writing books, and publishing.
There's nothing I can say that will convince anybody in so many words. It's like trying to convince someone who's never heard of it that we actually walked on the moon.
To me, this is about the life of the soul. It has become the most spiritually enriching and psychologically enlightening experience I can imagine having. Whatever its origin, It is frightening, overwhelming, and in the end, extraordinary and beautiful.
A noted astronomer once said that the universe is not only stranger than we imagine, it is stranger than we can imagine. We need to open our minds to ideas that lie just outside our full comprehension. For in doing so, we may understand this strange universe a bit more fully. They're here.
Secrets and Mysteries presents information based in part on theories and opinions, some of which are controversial. The producer's purpose is not to validate any side of an issue, but through the use of actualities and dramatic recreation, relate a possible answer, but not the only answer, to this material.